Welcome to Inclusion Talks, another episode as we look at some of these outstanding athletes who, despite some barriers in their lives, are having outstanding sporting careers. And my name's Dan Lonergan. With me, of course, is my co-host, Cindy McDougall, who has put together all these interviews. She has got an outstanding reputation as a volunteer in para sports, in all ability sport, especially in the sport and disciplines of athletics. Cindy, good to have you with us once again.
Great to be here, Dan. Very excited for today's one. It's going to take me a bit out of my comfort zone, so I'm very, very excited.
Well, we're looking forward to it. And of course, we're here for, as we are every week, Aussie Home Loans. They deal with anyone in Australia. We've got clients in every state and capital city, and their areas of expertise include purchasing a property, owner-occupied or investment, building a property portfolio, refinancing, debt consolidation, cash out, construction, pre-approvals, first home buyers, equipment loans, car and personal loans. As we do every week, Cindy, it's your baby. Tell us about our special guest today. I've had the pleasure to meet once at a function a couple of weeks ago, and her story is as inspirational as they come.
Very excited for today. So today we welcome Emma Mickle. For those not aware, Emma was involved in an accident 3 years ago and was crushed by a tree in a remote area in New Zealand. As a result of that accident, she was left with a spinal injury. Emma's determination to return to sport is the most incredible journey. From the first few weeks after her injury, her determination to get back to as functional life as possible shone through. Now, giving back as a public speaker and supporting initiatives that bring awareness and fundraising to spinal-based organisations, Emma is aiming for the highest levels of sport by getting on a bike and taking on her next challenge, the Cycling World Cup and Para Elite Cycling. Welcome, Emma.
Thank you. Thanks, Cindy. Stoked to be here.
Great to have you on board. Now, to get us started, you suffered what for many would be a dream and life-destroying injury. It left you needing to learn to walk again, took away, albeit temporarily, the career that you loved as a paramedic, left you facing an extended period of time in hospital and rehab, and changed your entire life trajectory. How were those first few days after your accident? And how did you begin to focus your mind on forging a pathway back to your new normal?
Yeah, it was quite an injury. So I think in those early days, I'm fortunate enough that I can't actually remember, the first 4 or 5 days in hospital, which I think is a bit of the medications we were on, plus the brain not wanting to remember the trauma. So those first few days were quite easy, but the memories I have of those first few weeks in hospital and going into rehab, it was quite a tough period and a lot of down moments, but I suppose I just had to make the decision then and there that I wanted to see how much return to function I could get and how I could best get back to my normal everyday life.
Mentally, that must have been such a hard thing and such an amazing, I guess, journey for you as soon as you were back in I guess, a mental capacity to understand what had happened. When did you first think, I want to do sport and that, maybe I could do it well?
Well, it kind of stemmed first from so prior to my injury, I'd been training for an Ironman triathlon, and I was registered for the triathlon over in New Zealand, and I was 4 weeks out when my accident occurred. And it all stemmed from trying to organise a refund with Ironman for my entry, because funnily enough, to put yourself through that torture costs about $1,000. And despite my long list of injuries, Ironman said no, they wouldn't refund it. The best we can offer you is a 2-year deferral for your entry. So that kind of set the goal, the first goal, to be like, right, well, we'll have to tick this off. I didn't know what that would look like at that time, whether I'd be in a hand cycle or getting towed around by my best friend. Who knew? But I just knew that we had to tick that one off, and just get back into sport in whatever capacity I could at that stage.
Did they
That
give
would be
you,
quite
Emma?
crazy for you to think that. Sorry,
No,
Dan.
they go on, Cindy. Sorry.
Yeah, that must have been so crazy for you to think that something from a protocol would actually give you a motivation and I guess something to aim for in those darker days.
Yeah, absolutely. Like it was kind of a blessing in disguise. Like I still remember, all the physio sessions in the rehab hospital. Each time I could do something more, I was like, "Yep, we're getting closer to that start line." And so, even though I wanted my refund at the time, I'm quite glad they didn't give it to me, as the benefits certainly outweighed it in the end.
You've turned it into a positive, because it would have been no doubt disappointing that you couldn't get your refund. It's not as if it was your fault that you weren't going to compete.
Yeah, I reckon. I just thought with the injury list as it was, like surely if you're ever going to get a refund out of them, that would be the time. But no, you just can't.
It actually astounds me, if I'm being completely honest.
Yeah,
I
me
cannot
too.
believe that something of that gravity and there's just such an ironclad no.
Yeah. Yeah, well, they initially started with, I will give you a 12-month deferral. And we're like, we're not even going to be close in 12 months, guys. So the 2 years was them being generous.
Oh,
What led
generous.
you to cycling, Em? What was cycling something you'd been heavily involved in pre the accident outside of triathlon? What made you choose the bike as your future pathway?
Uh, it became quite an easy choice in the end. So I quickly learnt that although I kept trying, running was no longer for my legs. Um, and swimming with one arm, although I found it quite relaxing, I just knew that it was never going to be that like competitive enough to take it. It's a sport. Whereas cycling, like jumping back on the bike for the first time in rehab, you strap your feet into the pedals, and like it was the first time that motion of pedaling felt normal. Whereas walking was a struggle. I had to think through every step of walking, whereas the bike just natural. Um, and certainly coming out of rehab and building on that, the cycling is definitely where I found my happy place and found that freedom of movement again. And thought, why not? Like, let's just jump on the bike and see how far we can take it.
You mentioned rehab. What did rehab look like and how did that lead you into that training? I'm assuming it would have started pretty slowly and it would have been quite a hard slog. So when did it actually click in for you that, yeah, I really do like this and I'm really comfortable with it and the body's doing what it needs to do? This is definitely it.
Yeah, so initially rehab, in the acute phase, it was 4 months in a spinal ward, where you're doing physio OT every single day and just learning the basics again, and just getting back as much independence as possible. And then from there, it kind of progressed to, you come home in the outside world again, and um, having the modifications done to your bike just meant that I could get outside. Um, so it was just freedom. Um, in terms of when I decided to, think that cycling could be a goer, probably wasn't until 2.5 years in when, the legs were strong enough. I'd probably become a better cyclist than what I was pre-injury just through spending so much time on the bike. And yeah, just thought, well, if this is how far I can come in 2.5 years, then what am I going to be in another 2.5?
So, what adaptations to your training and events did you need given the physical limitations and given the amount of work that you had to do to be able to make that something that then came easy. What did you have to adapt? How did you have to adapt that to succeed?
Do you mean in terms of the bike or in terms of just training schedules and stuff?
Overall, so yeah, the bike and training as well. I'm interested in the whole story. Like I find it crazy to think that, you know, your body could be so incredibly hurt, and that you can go, okay, I'm trying this in rehab, I'm going to jump on this and go really hardcore at this. So yeah, really interested in just adaptations both to the bike but also to your training, because I'm assuming your physical limitations definitely initially would have restricted what you were able to do and how you could do it.
Yeah, absolutely. So I pretty much left hospital, and although I could walk at the time, in terms of like the strength in my legs, and my balance was still severely affected. So I couldn't just go jump back on two wheels. So I started it off on a three-wheel recumbent trike, which is was a great start for me. And from there, we just progressively built it up. So, you know, my first ride might have been a few kilometers and I needed to get a push to get up the hills. Or occasionally would even tie a tow rope between my bike and my best mate's bike, and she'd tow me up the hills. So that always worked well. And then even just getting back on two wheels was quite the process too. I think I first tried about 6 months in and was able to get going and able to balance. But again, if there was any slight slopes, I'd struggle. And then there was also a lot of complications with pressure sores and things like that, because with my injury, although I got the motor function back in my legs, I don't have much sensation, and no sensation in the saddle area or where my feet touch the pedals. And so, you know, that first ride on two wheels, I ended up just sliding off the saddle and into the bar, because I just didn't know where I was on the bike.
Yeah, so it affected that spatial awareness of where your body is.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, after that first ride, I had to go back to the recumbent for another 6 months and kind of troubleshoot and just wait till I got stronger again. And then once we did, the adaptations for my two-wheel normal bike included having my brakes split. So both my front and rear brake are connected to the one lever, so I can control it all on the left. And same with my gears. I've just got an extra set of buttons, so my gearing's all done on the left. And then, funnily enough, the most high-tech idea we could come up with to attach my right arm, which has no hand function, was just a very high-tech piece of Velcro, which does the job.
That's incredible. It's incredible to think that something so rudimentary could make such a huge difference.
Yeah. And like once we figured out that, you know, that right arm needs to be attached to the bike, like it just added so much stability and felt so much more secure than that fear of hitting a bump and having your right arm fly off.
Emma Mickle is our guest. It's fantastic to hear her story. So much more to tell. And we're here, of course, for Aussie Home Loans for Inclusion Talks, and they deal with anyone in Australia. They've got clients in every state and capital city. Emma, have you always been a resourceful person by nature, or do you think, hearing just some of the things you've been telling us about having to put your bike together, the modifications for the bike, that you become resourceful because you sort of have had to pursue a career in cycling since your injury?
Oh, I think, you know, I worked previously as a paramedic, and I think that's a job where we're constantly problem solving and coming up with a bit of ad hoc ideas, because, you know, people never hurt themselves or have a medical episode in convenient places. So I think a lot of that problem solving skills I developed through that career. And yeah, it's certainly been something that has had to continue to be able to ride a bike and ride a bike safely.
So just off topic, you've gone back to your previous career now?
I did. So that was another one of my big goals, was to get back working with Ambulance Victoria. And although I couldn't get back as an operational paramedic and working on road, I ended up working up in the call centres in referral and dispatch, which was a great experience, and I was very grateful for. But I lasted 2.5 years up there and worked through the busy COVID pandemic, and unfortunately, that with just the joys that come with shift work, working the 10 and 12-hour shifts, it just wasn't sustainable for this body anymore. And I ended up saying goodbye to ambulance at the end of last year, with a bit of the intention that I just want to put 100% effort into cycling and to see what else is in this world for me.
Do you miss it?
That's awesome. I think that's a determination. So yeah, as Dan said, do you miss that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think paramedics is one of those jobs where, as well as being a job, it also kind of formed a lot of our identity as well.
Bit of a vocation.
Yeah, and your whole life kind of revolves around it. Like, you fit in life to fit in with shift work and that. So I definitely miss that aspect, and I miss all my workmates that had the pleasure to work with. But yeah, as I said, like, it was also kind of exciting to close that door and see what one opens up next.
You're incredibly proactive in increasing awareness around spinal injury and spinal injury funding. Was that something that led you to be so passionate about it? Is it your career? Was it the accident itself? What drove you to, I guess, put your effort and transfer your effort that isn't sports related into actually building the fundraising side of things and supporting those organisations?
Yeah, I think the biggest contributing factor there was spending 4 months in a spinal ward. As a paramedic, I always saw the acute side of people's injuries. And, we spend half an hour with a patient and handball them off to hospital. So I never really saw what happens after we say goodbye. And spending 4 months in the spinal ward certainly gave me a whole new perspective. You'd see, middle-aged men with their families come in, and then over the next few months, like, you see them, break down, their bodies fail them, and it's just the whole flow-on impact to their families and their lives was pretty heartbreaking. And me being the fortunate one, the one that, did get enough motor function back and walked out those doors, is something that, I'll forever be grateful for. And coming out of there, I just felt that need to give back in whatever way I could. So I just needed to do something and be proactive. But then there was also that little bit of being selfish there as well, because it also made me feel good and made me have goals and just kept me busy at a time when I needed something else in life.
I think volunteering is great in that it is an incredible way to build yourself up. And I know from my perspective, it gives you confidence and it gives you, I guess, a focus when maybe you are struggling to find that focus. And you also get the added benefit of seeing the difference that you can make. And I did read in a little bit of your bio, and I know that that's already happening. So, you look for those little bits of a blessings from things that seem quite disastrous, and I think the difference that you're already making is incredible. So yeah, from a volunteer's point of view, I loved reading that.
Yeah, no, it's good. And the organisation I've been involved with, Spinal Cure Australia, like, from the minute I reached out to them, I just got that sense that they truly believe that a cure for spinal cord injuries is a matter of when, not if. And like, to me, that's, it just gives that little bit of hope that in the future there could be something. And the impact that would have on so many people's lives is, mind-blowing.
Our guest today on Inclusion Talks with Cindy McDougall and Dan Lonigan is Emma Mickle, who's a spinal injury sufferer, but is hoping to be able to represent Australia in cycling at the Paralympics. And we're here for Aussie Home Loans. Their areas of expertise include purchasing a property, refinancing, building a property portfolio, debt consolidation, cash out construction, pre-approvals. They're right around Australia, first home buyers, equipment loans, car loans, and personal loans. Emma, you mentioned you spent 4 months in a spinal injury ward. Obviously, at times, your confidence would have been dented. Having met you, and we did a sporty together, you seem a very confident person, but how much was your confidence dented at times by being in that spinal ward? And also, obviously, the background with your injury was you were seen as a paraplegic after the accident, but not long after, there's some good news that you're only a partial paraplegic, which meant you could start the long process to walk. And I'm sure that gave you a lot of confidence.
Yeah, so with spinal cord injuries, you can either be complete, where it's a complete sever of the spinal cord, or incomplete, which is just damaged. And it just being incomplete doesn't necessarily guarantee that you will walk again. You could put 5 patients in the same room and we all have the same level of injury and be incomplete paraplegics, and we could all look completely different in terms of who's got function, who's got sensory function, who's got bowel and bladder control, etc., etc. So it's just really luck of the draw. And yeah, like those initial stages in rehab when I didn't know what the future would look like, and nobody could give us answers, and no matter how grumpy my husband got at the doctors, like they just didn't know and they couldn't tell us. But once I did start getting a bit of movement back, it was just a process of like working with what we've got and then building on it and waiting until something else happened. And for me, I was lucky that the more I did, the better I got. And the better I got, the more independence I got. And it just set up this positive feedback loop that, if I put the effort in now, life is going to get so much easier for me. And I think at that stage, I wanted to return to my normal life. I hadn't accepted that, things might never get the same. And that didn't come until probably 12, 18 months later that, that this was going to be different and I would have to accept a new normal. So yeah, it's kind of come in ebbs and flows of good and bad, but initially it was just work with what we've got and keep pushing.
You've been very open about there are aspects of your body that don't work properly like everyone else. And we take for granted, able-bodied people, if you've got to go to the toilet, you've just got to go. And you go whenever. Now, with your situation, Emma, if you don't mind me bringing this up, one of my favourite shows is The Big Bang Theory. And Sheldon Cooper's on The Big Bang Theory, and he's got a bathroom schedule. Now, I believe, Emma, in real life, if you don't mind me saying, and I know you're getting red in the face, but you're open about it at the sporty, you've got a bathroom schedule. And how does that work, particularly when you are training and competing, if you don't mind me asking?
It doesn't always work, let me tell you. But yeah, one of the added bonuses of a spinal cord injury is loss of bowel and bladder function.
Yeah.
So in terms of managing your bladder, I self-catheterize every 2 to 3 hours. Just have a reminder on my phone, and yeah, off I go. Otherwise, yeah, my bladder gets too full and I have an accident. And then, yeah, in terms of bowel management, I am very much like Sheldon Cooper, morning and night. Yeah, it just involves using an NMR and managing your bowels that way. Trying to mix that with, elite sport, it's well, it's probably the most challenging aspect, if I'm being honest. Like
If you're competing overseas, you're not exactly sure how things like that can and would work. So that would add quite a bit of complexity to it.
It does. And even just your everyday training, like I go out for 3-4 hour endurance rides quite often, and we call it therapeutic dehydration because I've got to drink enough that I have enough blood pressure to stay upright and feel okay on the bike, but not too much that, I'm going to wet my pants on the next effort that I have. So yeah, it does make things difficult, but you learn to live with it and yeah, just plod on.
You seem to have
While
made.
you're on that,
Go on, Cindy. Sorry.
No, you're right, Dan. You can ask yours. I've got mine ready to go when you're right.
Well, I was just going to say, you seem to have made peace with that, Emma. But as we've said, and this will be my last question on it, it would be extremely frustrating, particularly when you're in the middle of a race or a big training period to get ready for a race where you're obviously concentrating on certain aspects to prepare you properly.
Oh, I may come across that I've accepted it, but there's still plenty of times I'll throw a little temper tantrum when I've wet my pants. um, but yeah, like it does, as I said, it just makes things hard. And sometimes I've just got to accept the fact that if I am out in a long race where I do need to be drinking more and keeping my fluids up, that there is a high chance that I'm going to finish the race and going to need a spare change of tacks. But
I think that shows your commitment and your determination, to be honest.
Correct.
I love it.
Correct. Yeah, you've got to be positive.
Well, maybe I chose cycling as the right sport because you've got the padded shorts, so it's
Perfect.
like BYO nappy at all times.
Now, with your sport, there are all different classifications. So I'm assuming that there would be different classifications within it for the level of body function that you have. So you're a C3. For those that may not be up with classification means in paracycling, what does that entail and what is that one?
Yeah, so with paracycling, you've got your physical impairments, you've got your visual impairments, and your intellectual. So with the physical, you've got C1 to C5, 5 being the least impaired, and C1 being the most. And it just depends on how many limbs you have affected and to what degree they are affected. So, for example, if you're a lower limb amputee, you'd be a C2. Whereas if you're an upper limb amputee, you're a C5 because obviously, your legs are required more for cycling. So it's going to be a lower category. I sit right in the middle as a C3 because I've got 3 out of 4 limbs affected, but, my left leg is pretty good. So it's not bad enough to be a C2. And then also you've got the wheelchair guys, the trike guys, and the tandems for the vision impaired, which are pretty cool to see race around.
That is definitely brilliant. When you race, do you only race against your C3s or are you mixed in with the other classifications?
So for most racing, we race against our own. So for World Cups, World Champs, and national competitions, you're broken into your own categories, which is really good. They do, we will race, for example, C1s to C3s will race a road race together. That's more so to just bring up numbers to make a bunch, to make it a road race. But the results are always separated. I do believe that the Paralympics, so Paris coming up, it's still a factored event. So like C1s to C3s will race combined, and then it's factored to determine the winners.
Talking the percentage model that athletics does.
Yeah, sounds like it.
Yep.
Talking of obviously the blind cyclists, I mean, Kira Modra is very famous. One of the great success stories in Paralympics. Someone like that inspire you in regard to the success that they've had, even though, of course, it's a different category?
Oh, yeah, exactly. Like I couldn't limit it to just picking out one athlete who,
Yeah.
I can take inspiration from. Like I've recently come back from a month in Europe with the Australian para team, and just spending a month with those guys, it's just so impressive what they they have achieved and continue to achieve, like on the bike, but more so off the bike. Like how they can still be mums and have families, and um, just keep going with life despite their struggles and their injuries is something that I take so much from, and I think I'll always take so much from. So yeah, I can't just pick one person. I'm sorry.
No.
No, that's great. I think it's great. You have lots of inspirations.
Yeah, so many.
Now, obviously, you're trying to, or you have been trying to qualify, and it would be an outstanding achievement considering you're only been going down this path of paracycling for a few years now, Emma, of getting in the team for Paris. Last time we spoke, you'd just been over in Europe. You probably didn't have the campaign you were looking for. What did you learn from that experience? And are you still an outside chance? And if not, how much has it gilded your loins, if you like, for want of a better expression, to have a real crack at LA, that maybe you might be ready in LA more than you might have been in Paris with a bit more time?
Yeah, look, I think there's just too many girls ahead of me for Paris this year. And they've been in the sport so much longer than I have, and they deserve those chances to head off to Paris. So I'll be stoked for them regardless of if I'm there or not. But yeah, the trip I had over in Europe has definitely, lit a fire in the belly, and I just know that if with more time on the bike, getting stronger and more experience racing, that I don't see any reason why I can't be there in a few years' time. And yeah, certainly hungry for it.
What pathways, can you explain to our listeners what the sort of pathways look like from, say, grassroots to elite? So if there was someone listening to the podcast that's interested in getting involved in cycling, where would they start and where does it go from there?
Yeah, so my experience was simply just Googling it. So I Googled paracycling Australia and got Oz cycling website popped up, and who to contact in terms of that initial stages. And I sent off an email saying, this is my injury. What are my options? And they said, yep, let's get you classified at the next race. And that just happened to be, a couple of weeks before their national championships. So I headed off to Ballarat and got classified from the physios. And then they're like, oh, well, we've got to see you race now, which I was very underprepared for, and ended up losing by almost 15 minutes. But like it was just the starting point.
That's about
So
getting involved.
yeah, it was. And then once you're there, like paracycling's not huge. So, that first race, I'd met everyone, I'd met the coaches, got invited back to train once a week with a group of paracyclists on the track, so the velodrome. And kept that up for 12, 18 months. And again, just building those relationships and really just waiting for the legs to get stronger and fitter.
What does your training schedule look like?
A lot of bike time. So I'm riding 5-6 days a week, about 15, 20 hours, which ends up being about 300-400K a week on the bike. And then we'll also tick off 2 gym sessions and 1 physio session as well.
It's pretty intensive.
Yeah, it is, and it's certainly been a slow build to that. Early days training would have been maybe 6 hours a week, and I was probably more fatigued then than I am now.
You attended and were extremely successful in last year's Oceania Cycling Championships on home soil in Brisbane. That would have been extremely exciting and a humbling experience that you got to compete, I guess, at home in your home country, hopefully in front of friends and family. Can you talk to us about what that experience was like for you?
Yeah, it's cool. Like I think I've realized that anytime I get to travel with my bike and go train and race in other places, like that probably is my happy place. And getting to hang with the team and just learn from them is such an added bonus. The course up in Brisbane for Oceanas was quite challenging. It was a very hilly course for both the time trial and the road race. So it was challenging racing, and also a bit too hot for my liking. But um, it was a great experience, and hopefully we can keep going back there for years to come.
Emma Mickle's with us. She's our guest today on Inclusion Talks with Cindy McDougall and Dan Lonigan for Aussie Home Loans, who deal with anyone in Australia. Got clients in every state and every capital city. Tell us about your partner, Emma, your long-term partner, Jason. He's obviously been an inspiration to you. He's had to adapt in a different way to your injury. What's it been like for him, and what's he mean to you?
I don't want to give him a big head. No,
Go on.
I'm one very lucky girl.
That's great.
So I'd met Jace probably 2.5 years before my accident and knew straight away that he was the one. We'd bought a block of land together and we're in the process of just starting the build when my accident happened. And yeah, over in New Zealand when I was in ICU there, I think I kind of did the thing of, you don't have to stay, like you didn't sign up for this type chat, classic. And so Jason has then decided to head to the jewelry store the next day and buy a ring and come back and get down on one knee and propose, which is a lovely story. I just have no recollection of it. But I apparently said yes, and it was a lovely ring.
Free card down the road.
Yeah. So yeah, from day dot he was by my side, and coming back to Australia, he ended up moving into the accommodation at the rehab hospital, and he was my toughest physio and the toughest OT. Like he had me doing sessions 3-4 times extra a day, and yeah, there was never any time where something was too much for him. He'd come in on the weekends, and instead of having the nursing staff do my morning care and shower me, etc., Jace would buy them a coffee and tell them to skip my room, and he'd come in and do all that. So like it's just incredible what he's done and continues to do.
How much do you think that's helped your journey and helped your development in it? Is support, is that sort of support something that you can go, yep, I know that's what drives me, and I know that's what helps me?
Yeah, and I don't think that can be undervalued at any part. Like honestly, without Jace, without mum, my brother, my best mates, like there's no chance I'd be where I am today. They just didn't give me any time to, feel sorry for myself or get too down or, have a lazy day. It was just, there was always someone there, and there still is. Like, I'm just very fortunate in that regard.
When you're training and competing, how hard is it to keep those connections? And, you say there's a lot of friends and a lot of family. I'm guessing through your accident that there may have been people that dropped off. I hope that isn't the case, but I've heard that in a lot of occasions like that, people do tend to drop out of your life. How do you find your connections and even your parasport connections? How important are they? And how do you maintain that when you're very busy in training?
Well, first part of that question, I feel like my core base of mates have stayed the same. and nothing's really changed there. Like, even in the early days, we were still doing the same old silly stuff that we'd always done. Like, I want to go climb that mountain. And they'll be like, sure, like, let's figure out how to get you up there with one arm and two crappy legs. So
Love that.
we were just still doing silly stuff, and not telling the physios. And even now, my riding schedule looks a lot different, and training is very structured and on certain days. Yeah, my mates are silly enough to just sit on my wheel and hang on for as long as they can. And yeah, like, just lucky. I can't say that enough, just lucky in that regard. But then I look now to the group of mates that I've made through paracycling, and know now that I've got a whole other group that are going to be lifelong mates. And, I can certainly relate to them different, because, they're also gone through some life-altering change as well. And there's that camaraderie through that as well. We just understand each other and understand when we're having bad days and bad training days and things like that. So
what does that look like when that happens, Em? Like, how does that impact you when your body isn't doing what you want it to do? And especially if it's in the lead up to important competitions, how do you, I guess, counteract that, or how do you work around that, and how do you minimize the impact of those sorts of days?
yeah, well, like, I'm fortunate in one regard that, my body never really lets me push too hard. There's always a lot of warning signs that I'm on the edge of burnout and I'm on the edge of getting sick, injured, etc., etc. So my body kind of forces that rest upon me. But for me, like, it's just the constant battles of, managing the fatigue in the legs, managing the pressure sores that come from the no sensation and riding too much, managing the nerve pain, like managing your sleep schedule. Yeah.
So I'm guessing
everything.
you have like a support, not so much a support network as in friends and family, but definitely support network in allied health and people like that would help you manage those, or is that something you have to do for yourself?
No, I do have a good support system in that regard too. So I've had the same physio, since leaving hospital. So shout out to Cara at Succeed Physio. She is remarkable at keeping this body moving, and yeah, just continuing on, building strength and endurance in the body. And then a lot of it too just comes down to learning what my body can and can't do, and where the limits are. So it's, I don't always get it right, and I have ended up in a few holes in the past, but I feel like with time I've just gotten better at managing.
Now, Emma, you did mention, of course, as well as the partial paraplegia, there is no movement in the right arm. So obviously you are riding predominantly in the left arm. There would be times when there would be a lot of fatigue there, especially on the long rides. How do you keep yourself mentally positive that you've just got to keep going?
Yeah, I think I just got to keep things in perspective, that, I'm choosing to be there, and then I'm choosing to ride my bike, and these are the reasons why I ride. That, I love it, and that it beats being at work. So that's always the positive, and it, I can always draw back on the days that I was in hospital and I couldn't be doing what I wanted to be doing. So anything I'm doing now is 100 steps forward of that, and 100 times better. So yeah, perspective is a pretty powerful tool.
And you're starting to do the talking circuits now. How's that helping you as well in regard to being able to cope with everything and get yourself ready for a Paralympic campaign, which, as you say, probably won't be this time around, but maybe in 2028. And also, I suppose, getting the message out there about Paralympians, about the great role that they play in society and providing a positive environment.
Yeah, I was actually a bit shocked when you introduced me as a public speaker at the start. That is not something I'd define myself as, and I think you'd find many of my friends would have a good laugh at that too. As prior to the accident, certainly was not the case. But it is something that I'm now an athlete with the Victorian Institute of Sport, and as well as being an athlete, they're very big on other aspects of life outside of sport. And so they kind of gave me the gentle push into public speaking and getting out in schools and other events. Apparently my story so far is all right. People will listen.
For someone who doesn't like public speaking, you do a fantastic job, by the way.
Very good at it. I mean, as I said, I saw her for the first time, Cindy, a couple of weeks ago, the Seaford Football Netball Club. The Netball Club actually, Taylor Robertson organised an outstanding morning and early afternoon for the netball girls and women's footballers. And we had Erin Bell, the former Australian netballer, and we had Emma. And she was fantastic, did a great job, told a story as engaging as she is now. Didn't take herself too seriously, which is incredible when you consider what she's been through. Mind you, she has every right to take herself too seriously, and I think there's a future there. And if you can tell your own story, I think in adversity, I think you're going a long way. I really appreciate your time today, Emma. I mean, looking ahead to the Paralympics, how do you think the cycling team will go? As you say, there's a lot of girls with a bit more experience than you that'll probably get that opportunity ahead of you. Obviously, you'll be watching it closely. Again, excuse my ignorance. What's our record like in paracycling, and how do you think we'll perform in Paris?
Yeah, I reckon we'll do all right, Dan. I think the world champs on track, we had a few outstanding performances there and a couple of gold medals, and same with the World Cup road events. So I think the guys are looking pretty strong and fit, and I reckon there'll definitely be some medals coming home with them, which will be cool to see.
Excellent. Well, look, we appreciate your time. It's been you got one before we go, Cindy? I think you might, haven't you?
Yeah, if I could. I'd be really interested. It's my favourite question, and I do tend to ask everybody. If you could go back in time and talk to your younger self, what would you say, or what message would you give yourself, knowing where life has taken you and knowing what you know now?
Stress less.
I
think I just grew up, as a kid at school, putting so much stress into getting the perfect marks and getting the ATAR and then uni scores and all that stuff. And I think if I could go back, I'd just say stress less, enjoy it more, appreciate the people you've got and the opportunities you've got, and just go for it.
Such a brilliant message. Love it.
It's a great message. Well, Emma, we wish you all the best as you continue your push to become a Paralympian. I'm sure with the great attitude you have, the work ethic you've got, you'll eventually get there. As we say, probably not Paris, but LA 4 years away. And obviously the big one would be Brisbane in 2032. A lot of water to pass under the bridge, but I certainly remain confident in getting to know you in the last couple of weeks or so that you will get there. It's an outstanding story. We appreciate you joining myself and Cindy today on Inclusion Talks. And we, of course, are here for Aussie Home Loans. We thank Windy and his crew for being on board with us. They deal with anyone in Australia. They've got clients in every state and capital city. They do Zoom as well. Their areas of expertise are purchasing a property, owner-occupied or investment. They build a property portfolio. They refinance, debt consolidation, cash out, construction, pre-approvals, first home buyers, equipment loans, car loans and personal loans. And they've got over 25 lenders on their panel as well. Thanks so much for joining us, Emma. All the best. We'll catch up soon.
Thanks, guys. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.